You know, what I was wondering is, watching it, is that there was, I mean, even like some of the people walking through, they're walking, you know, it seemed like an environment that was probably, and even just to have it filmed, more hospitable to their workers than you, even like today, when I think about people that are so hopeless and powerless, they seemed proud to be there. And I mean, even like the people that were dressed up, the women, the purses, taking the little slip of papers. I assume that was how long they worked, and so they could get paid eventually. I felt like it was a fascinating look into a different time where, what was that? Was it a middle class job? I assume kind of. No.
I mean, it was. So they all worked. I don't actually know the name of the suburb. I always forget in Pittsburgh, but a lot of them came from. They actually created a company town.
Okay.
Where a lot of them lived, and so the company would provide like almost everything for them, like housing and bowling alleys and bars and all of that, in hopes that they could kind of quell labor unrest, which was just rampant at that time. They were successful to some degree, but we were just talking about, there were strikes just right before these were filmed, massive strikes, because they wanted a union, and Westinghouse did not want unions. Mm-hmm. And so they lost a lot of their workers through that. So that was literally a year before this. But their goal was absolutely to portray happy workers, portray like a choreography of work, to show like everything's working, man and machine, or, you know, that was 100% the goal. And guaranteed they told the women, smile, you know, don't mess this up.
Yeah.
Right?
And they sort of fed them in. That line is probably artificial compared to how the time clock thing normally worked, but it was orchestrated for the benefit of trying to show off. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is to the glory of Westinghouse.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the industrialists of that era were kind of obsessed with branding themselves, and there was always these big contracts, and being able for Westinghouse to be able to show images of his factories at the World's Fair, using this new technology of film, and to do these things, was obviously like great advertising and kind of a coup. And so there's a reason to do it. So there is a kind of propagandistic element to it, but it's still fascinating, and I think it doesn't negate the observations you were making, because I think there is still a sense of pride in work and stuff that can coexist with all of those other things too.
I think that's what's really interesting about this time period, and also these films, is really, there's no one way to look at it, and I think that's really what we're trying to bring out, is it's like we are representing them in a different way than they were originally, because we want you to think about them in the present, but how do you think about them? You know, there's, in one sense, we can think about this period as like an absolute nightmare. We can also think about it as like this moment when like so much was done, and that we have the lifestyle we have now because of these changes. And so how do you look at that? And
the buildings, the actual infrastructure.
Well, this building would have been built around that time.
Yeah.
But you also, we're at a moment of, I think, impending like transformation. Which way are we going to go? Like we can look at the Industrial Revolution, and sure, there was a lot of progress, or a lot of innovation, a lot of really positive things came of it, but we also, the costs are enormous. And so where are we going to go now? Like, are we going to continue on the same path of just like utter destruction, or stop building, so there's just like lots of questions, I think, in parallels between the present and the past that we want to just dig into, rather than like, see them as one way or the other.
And that's the reason to make this piece, is not just to sort of like make it a history lesson, but to really sort of think about the present through the past.
Yeah.
How did they physically do it? How did they move the camera?
They had it on a crane. So there were cranes inside of the factory. There were 2 cranes that were capable of, I think, carrying just how many tons?
Yeah.
Tons of weight. These were also really innovative. They put electric light bulbs, which of course was also really new, on one crane, and you can tell like when they go through, it's really, really bright. It must have just blinded them. And then on the other one, they had the camera. That was a very new, before cinematography was invented, right?
Yeah.
So these are now normal practices.
Going through the whole factory from one end to the other, and capturing all this stuff. And of course, all of that was orchestrated, but there are some people who are kind of trying to act normal, like nothing's going, and there's some people who are just like staring at the camera. So you kind of get all of it in that.
The looking back, right? The kind of like, we're looking at them, but they're looking back at the camera, but also looking at us. And there's a lot of like I think looking through the films. But just we're also really interested in the parallels between film history and labor history. I think two things we don't think of together very often. And just the visions and the future-oriented nature of both is really fascinating. They're kind of looking at they're looking at their future, through or we're looking at their future, I guess. I don't know. Now I'm getting like confused by my own language, but anyway.
Well, no, it's interesting is you have a romanticism and a passion behind this time in this film. I can tell that, not that you pay attention, but you saw the details, right? And you have processed them. And I still think I'm going to see this film differently tomorrow because I need to process it still. Like, how many times have you seen it? Or like when you guys are setting the projectors up and stuff like that, right?
Well, we've been 2 years of looking at these films.
Now, when you shut your eyes, do you see it on the back of your retinas or anything?
But you still see new details and seeing them this big and walking up really close and just looking at the details that come in, you see differently every time. And that's what's really cool about it. It's interesting.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you, guys.